I think an hour. Oh, chocolate.
We're live.
Oh,
Hiya. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, world.
Yes, hello world.
Hello world. Oh goodness.
So, shall I introduce you both quickly?
Yes, please.
We are live with two fabulous authors, Lindsay Kelk and Lucy Robinson, both best-selling, fabulous, brilliant voices capturing what it's like to be in your 30s today. Very true. Lucy is the author of 3 novels and about to publish her 4th this April, which is called The Day We Disappeared. And Lindsay is the author of 9 novels, and her 10th comes out in May. So they both worked incredibly hard, and they've both got an enormous fan base, and we've got some fantastic questions come in from all over the place to ask you both. So sit back and enjoy. The questions are quite varied.
Excellent.
And range from the very serious and important stuff about writing to quite light-hearted.
Lindsay and I are very.
So
yeah, it's very serious. We're very serious people. So
send us lots of really serious questions.
I will do that. Good. So I can see it's brilliant. Everyone's so engaged. It's fantastic on Twitter, and coming up on the Hangout itself, we've got questions piling in. And really, it was just, I think one of the ones people kept asking was, where do you get your ideas from? I know it sounds really obvious, but you've both written characters and situations that have really resonated with your audience. So maybe you want to talk a bit about how you got the idea for your very first novel. Lindsay, do you want to kick off?
I do want to kick off, but yeah, it's fine. Yes, that's Rosie, hi. I started I Heart New York was my first book, and the original idea came from, I had been on vacation, sorry, I'm in America, punch me in the face. I had been on holiday to New York with my brother. Cheers. And I was a bit miserable in my life. I was been in the same job for a long time, been in the same relationship for a long time. Everything was fine, but everything was a bit rubbish. You know how it is. And I came back from this holiday to New York, and it was just like, God, if I could turn my life around, if I could just completely change everything, what would it be? And it was, like just sod off to New York and start again and have this new life. And I had always loved writing, and I had always written, but I'd never actually written a book. So I just sort of sat down with a anywhere but here idea that was like, if I could be doing anything, if I could go anywhere, how would it start? And that's how the book started, really. It wasn't a grand plan, there wasn't any rationale behind it, or reason to be like, oh, write this one. It's just, I love New York and my life was crappy, so that's what happened. Was like, if my life wasn't crappy.
It was a great inspiration, a great starting point. Yeah. How about you, Lucy?
Similar. I was writing a blog for Marie Claire about my absolutely appalling attempts at online dating, and an editor approached me from that and said, oh, you should write a novel. And I said, do you know what? I can understand why you've approached me, because I'm a great writer. I mean, I was obviously being slightly ironic, but I said, I know I can write, but I just don't think I have any ideas. I don't think I have any stories. And she said, oh, you must. I said, no, I don't think I'm an ideas kind of a guy. And we just got progressively more drunk, and in the end she just prompted me to start thinking about my own life, and she said, what's going on with you at the moment? And I said, well, I'm about to move abroad, had a big breakup, just sort of getting over that, just kind of putting my life back together again. And she said, brilliant, start with that, moving abroad, having an awful breakup. So that's what eventually became my first book, The Greatest Love Story of All Time. The abroad scene was all cut by my agent because she said it was awful. She was probably right.
But it is really interesting, I think, because, and it's perhaps why you two have bonded, but you both have been inspired to travel and go to places other than the corner shop in order to get your inspiration for your novels. And obviously, Lindsay, you've woven that in really strongly, and Lucy, I know you have managed to squeeze some foreign climes into your books, despite what your agent says. So coming back to Lindsay again, how important do you think that was, that kind of element of, yes, escape, but actually using a different country?
I think for me it was really important at the time because I think this is a really common thing, and I mean, Lucy will correct me if it's not for her, but like it was for me, I was so uninspired by everything in my life. Like everything in my life was exactly the same as it had been. So that one jarring thing, and I guess it could be anything. Like maybe for other people, it's a new relationship, or it's having a kid, or it's like one like big jarring experience that forces you out of your comfort zone and forces you to look at things differently. That was it for me. It was like, oh, actually, maybe my life isn't this. And that was the first time that happened. Was then, you know, it seemed natural to me after that to keep doing that and to keep exploring new places and pushing myself out of what I knew, which really then had a knock-on effect to what I believed I was capable of. Which
and I think
then
in your case, sorry, but also Lindsay, in your case, it's a great starter for comedy, isn't it, as well?
Yeah,
to put Angela particularly in.
Yeah, she's can get into situations. And as we all know, it's easy to get into situations in a country that's not your country, whether it's, you know, it doesn't even matter if it's the same language. It's, as I have learned from living in America for 6 years, it's very, very easy to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation or just a ridiculous situation just from not being from that place, which I think just gives a lot of comedy for a lot of people. Much like when Lucy, you'll like this, we saw a skunk in the street the other night, an actual skunk. And it was the most exciting thing that ever happened to me. It was chasing a cat like Pepe Le Pew. And that was a good 20 minutes of my life done. And I'm like, that would be good in a book. I'm like, how good would it be if Angela the skunk ran in front of her? I'm not selling it now, but at the time it was really exciting.
And Lucy, you've used some of your experiences or some of your different settings in your novels as well, now that you've moved on to 3 or 4.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's for me, traveling has a similar effect to I think to what Lindsay was describing. I think, you know, in my own life, I tend not to observe what's going on around me quite as much. Whereas, you know, of course, as soon as I go abroad, I become the flaneur in French modernist poetry language. There, you know, you become the man in the crowd. Punch me, Lindsay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You become the man in the crowd a lot more, and I just find for me that it makes my writing 10 times more vivid if I'm there, you know, with my eyes on stalks, watching everything the way that you know that you can't fail to do when you're travelling. I think that makes for far better writing, because when I'm just sort of drifting around my own life, I just tend not to observe things as much, unless obviously like a skunk crosses my path, which can only happen to Lindsay Kelk. When I went to visit her, a raccoon assaulted us in Prospect Park.
Yeah, I assumed they were friends when it came. Yeah, like clearly he's spoken to the raccoon, and
it's like, oh, the guys.
Well, you've both done a great job, because I can see a question up commenting on the atmospheres in your books and how fantastic they are, and how, you know, asking how you achieve that, and also a question about whether you think some sort of romance has to be included. And I think it's really interesting because you both play with like different settings and a bit of romance, and you create these amazing atmospheres, but it's a mixture of lots of things, isn't it? And what do you have a kind of recipe for what those elements need to be? Starting with you, Lindsay, because I'm looking.
I don't know, I think for me the most important thing when I'm writing, or when I'm rewriting more accurately, is it has to feel genuine. So it can be the most ridiculous situation, or it can be the most bizarre turn of events, but it has to feel to me like it's actually happening. So for me, it's, you know, the setting and the writing, and I have a massive tendency, which, you know, I'm doing some editing now, not right now, but soon, and I feel like I got into a habit of sort of massively overwriting situations, where like there was too much description and there was too much showing, not telling, and all that classic stuff. So it's just, for me, definitely a situation of making it feel authentic and real, and that for me is the atmosphere, is how it just all comes together to feel like a genuine event, no matter how outlandish the scenario might be. On the romance side, I mean, technically I think yes, because otherwise you would not publish it and I'd get my contract revoked. But I mean, I don't think obviously not every book has to have romance, and as my books have progressed, they've definitely become more, if not more, but as much about female friendship and life choices for women these days. And I try not to make the romance the be all and end all, because it's not, like real life, it's not. So for me, that's definitely part of how I build the whole world, how I build the book to feel like it should be a full, real, living, breathing thing. You should be able to feel like you walked into it and you were there. I think
that's really true. And how about you, Lucy? Which of those elements matter most to you, do you think?
It's hard because obviously life isn't all about love. But when I remember the stories in my life that I've loved most and have left me sort of most breathless, they've had an absolute monster love story. And I guess because it's that unifying human experience, isn't it, falling in love? But I think for me it can't just be about love, because even when you're deeply in love, there are other things in the world. Like I'm hopefully about to Skype with my partner after this, who's working abroad at the moment.
Can we all say, because he's lovely?
Oh, he is lovely. He's a nice bear. But anyway, he's off in some canyon in Mexico at the moment, and I haven't seen him for weeks, and I miss him desperately. Like, so much it hurts at times. But I'm sitting here with my cough medicine and my sirloin steak that I'm trying to defrost for dinner. And I've been having a conversation with somebody on email and stuff. And even when we're feeling at our most in love, there's still 20 different things going on. So I think for me, writing a romantic story has got to include all of the mess and the noise and the life and all of the other stuff that that is that's also a part of life too. I think for me, a love story doesn't work when I'm concentrating only on that and forgetting that at the same time you're probably picking your nose and ironing a top and reading a book and going to the loo.
Yeah, nice. And I think it's really interesting as well. I mean, Lucy, you wrote really movingly about friendship, and as you say, Lindsay, you've kind of moved on to write books where perhaps the female friendship plays as big a part as the romantic. And to what extent do you think you're reflecting your own realities of how important female friends really are for, whether you're single or coupled up, but for the 20 and 30 something women today, and certainly that's what we're seeing reflected on TV screens as well. Do you think that female friendship thing has become as important as the romantic element? I'm going to start with you again, Lindsay, because I'm predictable like that.
For me, personally, for me it is. I obviously can't speak to every human, and I know a lot of people want to read romance novels because they just want to read this kick-ass, amazing, like we were saying, is like a breathtaking love story, and that's what you want, and that's awesome. But for me, as a writer, I need both elements because, yeah, definitely in real life, that's the thing. I live in America, and I live far away from my family, and I live far away from a lot of people that I've known my whole life. So my female friends, especially my female friends, but male friends too, have become my family. And I think in today's society, actually I do enjoy starting a sentence with "in today's society" and commenting on that. But I think it is important now. It's not like 30, 40 years ago when your family was your world. And like my mom, that was definitely the case. She didn't have that many friends because she had her kids and her husband and all of her obligations, and she had very few close female friends, whereas that's not my experience. My experience is my friends and the life that we share together, and relationships are different now to how they were before. My I'm going to say partner. So my boyfriend is really important to me, and I love him, and I love being with him. But my friends have been my family for so long, and I can't imagine. It's weird with dating because it's a relatively new relationship. It's whatever, and I've had relationships begin and end. I still have a feeling of relationships can come and go for whatever reason, but your friends are so important to you, and I definitely try and communicate that in my books. I want that to be a part of it where people can see how important and how fulfilling and amazing female friendship can be. I think it gets a bad rap a lot of the time, and it's always girls against each other and girls get out to get each other, and I really try to show all the different sides of female friendship. So it's not just girl loves boy, evil girl comes in, takes away boy, girl kicks other girl's ass, and book ends. Like it's not to say, you know.
Good. And Lucy, I mean, obviously friendship has been really integral to your novels, one of them in particular. So would you say that's true for you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was probably the reason that I have a writing career is that I was perpetually single. I had maybe 3 boyfriends in the whole of my 20s, and one of them lasted a day, and I pretty much held him hostage for about 6 months. And then I had a couple of other relationships for a few weeks. So if I hadn't had my girlfriends, I would have been quite miserable. And I think I was the kind of girl who did say, you know, I'm absolutely fine being single, and I was. Nonetheless, that was because I had the support of so many brilliant girlfriends, and I lived in a big shared house like a lot of women do in their 20s in North London, and that's my next book that I'm 5 days into is going to involve a group of women who lived together in their 20s, having to come back to live together again in their 30s. And so I've had posts on my personal Facebook, and I've also been emailing with all of those girls who I used to live with, and the emails are hysterical. And actually, you know, they looking back through all of the things that we went through together and the ridiculous experiences that we had, I mean, really, truly, you couldn't make it up. And all of the things that have been coming through on Facebook, you get a sense that for all women, actually, their close female friendships are their real bricks and mortar, their real bread and butter. And I think, you know, women generally are a lot more independent these days, you know, for obvious reasons, both emotionally, financially, and in all professionally. And I don't think we search for a partner who can be our everything, who gives us like the sum total of everything we get from all of our friends, our family, our colleagues. You know, we have relationships. Women tend to have relationships these days with, you know, with somebody who's just a person, just a boyfriend, rather than everything. And so there is still very, you know, for me, there is still a very big cast of people, you know, around my relationship who are just as important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a really interesting question here that's come up as well, where someone has said you both write humour brilliantly, but do you have to have conversations with your characters? Do you have to say it out loud to make it funny, or can you just write it on the page and have it hilarious straight away? Lucy, why don't we start with you?
Actually, I don't hear my books at all. I see them. I think for me, the process of writing is a sort of process of instant feedback between me, the computer screen. When I say me, I mean my brain. So my brain, the computer screen, and my hands. And it's not a thought. And I'm sure Lindsay's, probably any writer is the same. It's not a thought process of which I have any real consciousness. So really, it's very much what's happening on the screen in front of me. I don't think I've ever kind of stopped and tried to listen to the conversation. Maybe it would benefit me to do so. I find that, yeah, generally dialogue comes very easily and very quickly, whereas prose paragraphs I have to take a lot longer to get right. So yeah, it's quite I see and read my dialogue rather than hearing it, I think.
Well, that's, as an editor, I can only say that's incredibly comforting, because dialogue, editors can't write dialogue. Editors can do all kinds of other things to make a book better, but the dialogue, how the characters sound and how they talk I think has to come, as you say, kind of straight from you. Lindsay, do you have long conversations out loud with your characters?
No, it's exactly the same as Lucy. The dialogue just comes out, and that's when I know things aren't good, when it isn't coming, because I am so reassured when I get to a phase that I know is just a lot of dialogue. So I'm like, oh, this is the best, because this just happens on its own. These people are just writing this for me, and it's just coming through me. It's the prose stuff that's difficult, without making it sound clunky and over expositional. And it's the dialogue does all the work for me. And yeah, I don't read it out. It's, again, like Lucy, I feel like I see it. It's like watching a film to me. When I'm putting it out, it just comes out, and it's, if I can't see it, then I know something's wrong with it. If that makes any sense, if that's helpful to anyone at all, I don't know. And I think that's why I'm really pro where people are like, oh, read as much as you can. Yes, do read as much as you can, but I find a really useful tool for me is watching TV and movies, because that's where I find my dialogue. And dialogue isn't like real life dialogue. Like, we wouldn't write this down and it go in a book because it wouldn't make sense. But like, you see TVs and movies and you see how dialogue works, and that I think really helps. Yeah, I haven't read any out loud, I don't think. Plus, if you read it out loud, it's so subjective. It's so where the influence and the where you're putting all the emphasis and how you're reading it. And when someone's reading it, they don't read it how you read it out loud. So it has to be able to work just there, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And also, if you read it out loud, you would both have to say quite a lot of rude words, because you both are fond of the odd swear word, perhaps. But that perhaps is what makes you feel contemporary and relevant and fresh, which has got to be a good thing today, hasn't it?
Yeah. I think it's healthy to have a good swear. I mean, I don't know any of my friends that don't swear at all, and maybe they don't swear to the degree that I enjoy or that Lucy might enjoy, which I think is why we're friends, because we're not afraid of each other's language. No one does a compound swear like Lucy Robinson does a compound swear. Very proud of you.
Many thanks.
Yeah, but then I've also had people tell me that they're offended by the swearing in my book, and I'm like, well, I feel bad that you're offended, but also, do you have to walk around the streets with your ears closed? Do you wear earmuffs when you leave the house? Like, swearing's a part of life. It's there. It's happening, and like you say, it's very much of the now.
Yeah. And Lucy, is it true that you had to have your swear words edited down a bit by your editor?
Not my British editor, but when my when my first 2 books went out in the States, I actually had to personally employ somebody to take out most of the swear words, because I took some advice on how swearing might be received in some parts of the States. And was advised to take out most words. In fact, I was given a list for clarity of what needed to come out. And I'm not joking, this person that I hired, I had to pay her for 2 weeks to take out swear words and to put in, replacement words, and then me look at them. And it was a constant battle of wills, because even though I was paying her to clean up my books, I didn't want to. And I got quite, what's the word? Resentful, because I think the thing is with swearing, if you've got a decent vocabulary and your swear words are, one of many, of course I appreciate this is a generational thing and a cultural thing, and it's not for me to decide who's going to be offended by what. I can't write a racist joke and say, oh, I don't find that offensive, and expect everyone else to agree. But I think generally, because I just feel that my vocabulary is reasonably extensive. And if I had nothing else to say, it probably would sound quite ugly. If you walk past somebody on a street corner and they're really swearing repeatedly and angrily into their phone, I find that offensive too, actually, because it's very aggressive and ugly and unpleasant. But I think swearing for comedy is it's clever. It's really clever.
And it's clever, and it's staying in the book. It's staying in the book, America.
Really good author.
Well, you've been brilliant on the kind of, as it were, the writing process. And I know we've also got lots of readers who want to ask about your characters and about Tess in particular, and about Angela, Lindsay in your books, because they're series characters who go on and on. So going back to each of you in turn, but starting with Lindsay, lots of questions. People desperate to know the answer. When's the next I Heart? When's the next girl book? And will they ever meet?
I don't actually know. There will be another Tess book. There will be another Heart book. Maybe they'll meet sometime. But I can't for sure concrete say when any of those things will happen. But they will happen. They will happen. I promise. Cross my heart and all that guff. Defo's happening. That's all I've got. I probably ought to finish this one first, because it's out in 3 months. So let's leave it at that. Let's leave it there, guys.
Amazing.
And Lucy, coming over to you, are you ever tempted to revisit characters or weave them back into future novels, or do you start with a clean slate each time?
Can Barry have his own book?
Eh?
That's my question. Can Barry have his own book?
Barry Island.
Barry.
I would love for Barry to have his own book, I'm not going to lie. I think for me to write any character, even a minor one, I've got to really love them. So I sort of, when I finish a book, I feel quite bereft. And when I was in New York recently with many people, including Lindsay Kelk, a lot of the Unfinished Symphony of You and Me, my third novel, is set there, and I went on a really self-indulgent walk around the streets and the places that things had happened, and I found myself feeling really sad that I wasn't going to see my characters. I looked up at the roof of this hotel and I thought, oh, maybe they're up there having a cocktail, and then had to obviously punch myself in the face. But I don't think it's really self-indulgent. I think really to write a character that your readers are going to fall in love with, you've got to really love them yourself. And I do really love my characters. So I often think, oh God, I'd love to carry this on and see what happens to them, because often a big kind of new love thing happen. It's the culmination of the book. But I have no I do. I've started writing a Christmas follow-on of my first novel, The Greatest Love Story of All Time. It's called The Greatest Christmas Story of All Time, and I have to say it was an absolute I've written about 3/4 of it, and it's been an absolute pleasure to write. It's the one piece of writing I have where I can just open the computer and write for hours and not take a breath and not struggle, and it's because I know those characters really well and I love them. So I sometimes I'm tempted, I must say, but I don't think I have a book deal to write series, so I probably shouldn't.
Well, the readers do love it, though. They love that, coming back to the same people, and I think that's been so interesting, kind of seeing the responses and the questions that have come in for this hangout. Just moving away from the books for a second, give us a snapshot of your writing day. Ha ha ha. What do you do to get yourself writing of a morning/evening? How do you manage to get the words out, or are you incredibly disciplined? Lindsay, I'm looking at you first. Yes.
It depends if I am on deadline or if I am in a good place with it. I can write for 12-14 hours and not worry. Like, I'll get out of bed, don't even get dressed, like just get out of bed, make a cup of tea, open the computer and just go. And then I will stop when I'm hungry, and I'll stop when I'm tired, and the day stops meaning anything, and the hours don't mean anything, and I just disappear from the world, and I have to put something on Facebook and be like, yeah, I'm not dead, don't worry about me, family and friends, I'm okay. Because they just don't hear from me for 3-4 days at a time. If that's not the case, then I will find any manner of nonsense to distract myself. I will do my taxes through choice. I will go to the gym and do a horrible spin class because I'm like, well, it's not procrastinating, it's healthy. I will find anything to do, and then eventually sit down at the laptop, squeeze out 500 words, do a cry and go to bed. It's literally one or the other. There's no in between. There's no healthy, get up and write for a couple of hours and then go for a lovely wander and come back. It is one or the other, and God knows how I intend to go on with this for the next 30-40 years of my life, but working now. It's working for now. So.
And how about you?
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'll talk to you later. Lucy, how does it work for you?
I'm the complete opposite, actually. I think Lindsay and I had a few days writing together when I was staying with her a few months ago, and I think she was baffled by my approach. I'm really disciplined, and I think I still am sometimes a television producer, and I'm used to working to frequent and horrific deadlines. And so when I got the deal for my first book, I had about a year to write it, and I just moved abroad at the time, and I just remember sitting on my balcony in Buenos Aires, obviously not writing my book, about to go and start Spanish school and then go on holiday for a few weeks. I was like, God, I'm not actually going to write this book if I'm not careful. So I decided that from the beginning I was going to be quite disciplined, and I've kind of fiddled around with my method here and there, but it basically boils down to strict periods of 45 minutes where I'm not on the internet at all unless I need to research something, followed by a break. And I try not to do, I think my absolute maximum if I'm on a deadline is 6 lots of those in a day. because I find that beyond that, my writing is so phenomenally shit. Oh, sorry, as discussed, so phenomenally rubbish. That it's not worth it. And that's what I find extraordinary about Lindsay, actually, because she writes like an absolute mentalist, but she turns out really high quality stuff. I mean, obviously as her editor, maybe you you see it in a worse state, but I find it extraordinary, Lindsay, that your volume and your output is so high, and you can write for 12 to 14 hours, as you said, and still actually turn out good stuff. I can't actually begin to tell you how bad my writing is if I write like that. So hat off.
Just a lot of cats being doffed.
And that, I guess, is the miracle of the creative spirit. It just runs differently in both of you, and long may it last. And then on to some slightly more frivolous questions. I've got 3 questions for each of you. So back to you, Lindsay. Somebody wants to know, what is your favourite flavour crisps? Someone else, what cheese is your favourite? And on a serious note, which literary character is most like you?
Crisps, pickled onion Monster Munch, which I feel is a well-known fact. So there's no point lying about it and saying something sophisticated and good. Cheese, there's a really weird cheese here. It's not weird, but it's at Trader Joe's, and it's like a cheddar, a really strong cheddar, but they blend it with Parmesan. So it's really, really strong and mental, and it's so good. And I will eat all of it, and that's why I've gained some weight. But that's fine, because it was worth it. Which literary character? I don't know. That spiteful little child out of the secret garden, probably, that just wanted her own way all the time, even though people were dying of like scarlet fever all around her. Was when I was a kid. I was obsessed with the secret garden when I was a kid, and she was just such a little bleep. She was a horrible child, and even when they turned her nice, she was still horrible. She's like, get out of the wheelchair, you don't need it, slap. And it was like, well, she's trying to be horrible for good, but she's still an awful human. I've always enjoyed that. I would totally be, yeah. And I can't even remember her name, which is terrible. Which is weird. Yeah.
It's a good literary twin to have.
Yeah, a horrible child that wandered the moors. That's my jam.
Right. And Lucy. So over to Lucy. It's crisps, cheese, and literary character.
Okay. Crisps, ready salted. Just yeah. I do like a What's-It, and I do like a Frazzle, and I do like a Monster Munch. But it's the posh ones, actually. They're quite the thick ones. I know, what a dick. Cheese, basically all cheese. It sort of depends on my mood. I'm a big fan of Cambozola because it has the dirtiness. Apparently, it's not actually a cross between Camembert and Gorgonzola, which I presumed it was, but it sort of has the dirtiness of both, in my opinion. Can't really go wrong with a good solid cheddar. I have to say, you know, strength 4 or 5. Can't go wrong with. And I'm also quite a fan of a really sort of dirty, rubbery, like a Leerdammer or a Comté or something just really dirty that's mostly plastic and 5% cheese. Which literary heroine am I most like? You know, I struggle so much with questions about books. I don't know why, but even though I've read thousands of books in my life, I just find that whenever I'm asked a question about books, they all disappear out of my head. And rather than waste valuable Google Hangout time trying to remember, think of an answer to that one, I'll just pass. Sorry.
Move on. No, that's fine. I always have exactly the same response. It's like when someone says, "What have you just enjoyed reading?" and you think, "Nothing. I can't remember anything. I've read nothing."
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody asked me who my book boyfriend would be one time, and all I could think of was Patrick Bateman, because it was the only man in a book I could think of. I'm like, well, if you think about it, he's quite wealthy, he's got a great job, and if he's not chopping your head off or putting rats up your private parts, he's a cracking choice. But it went badly.
Yeah.
It went badly.
I can see why.
Yeah.
And a couple of questions. I've got a shout out to Kevin because he has sent about 1 billion questions in for us.
Brilliant.
It's been amazing. But he has asked, what's the most embarrassing thing you know about each other? Can we know this on a Google Hangout at 7:45 in the evening?
Do we know anything horribly embarrassing about each other? And anything that we haven't already told everybody? Which I think
It's all out there anyway, to be honest. I wish it wasn't, but I think it is.
I mean, we don't have a lot of a filter. So
Poor boundaries. Poor boundaries.
yeah. I mean, we've talked about the raccoon. I don't know.
Oh, well, oh no, this is just me dishing up my own embarrassing moments that involve Lindsay. It's not about hers. No, I can't.
I don't think we've got anything terrible.
No.
No, that's good though. That's good, as you say. No filter. You're just out there.
Yeah.
And a question about film. Who would you cast in a film of your books? Pick one of your books, for example, or has there ever been in your mind an ideal casting?
No, I get this a lot, and I'm terrible at it, and I really just need to pick an answer and stick to it. Because I don't know if it would be the same for Lucy, but because I spend so much time with these characters and they exist so entirely and completely in my brain, whenever I try and attribute an actor, whenever I try and associate an actor to that character, it doesn't work, because to me they're real. And the idea of then saying, oh, well, like X should play Angela, I'm like, but Angela's Angela. Like, how could I have someone else play Angela? Like, and that would mess with my brain and the way I deal with it, I think. So I love hearing it from other people. I find it fascinating how other people they make those associations. But for me, I can't do it, which is again another crappy pass. A good question. Sorry.
That's fine. How about you, Lucy?
Exactly the same, actually. I've never really had any moment of. I mean, to be honest, I'm crap with famous actors anyway. I don't really know who any of them are, and readers frequently tweet or Facebook me saying, "Oh, what do you think? Don't you reckon that so and so would be great playing your so and so character?" And I'm always like, "Yeah, oh my God, that's really great." Thinking, I don't know who that is. I'm so old and behind the times. I think the only time I've ever, in my first novel, there's an amazing man called Dave, who I get a lot of book boyfriend votes for, and I quite agree. I fancy him rotten, and he's a cameraman, and he's a news cameraman, and he's sort of quite grotty, and he smokes and he shouldn't, and he wears old army jackets, and he has a lot of holes in his clothes, but he's gorgeous, and he's got this big mop of hair and these very piercing blue eyes. I mean, his hair's pretty awful. He's not your average romantic lead, but people have often suggested who they think he should be, and I've never agreed because, as Lindsay said, he's my Dave, he's my boy. But then I was watching Hotel Rwanda a year or two ago, and Joaquin Phoenix in that plays a news cameraman, and in that he's wearing holes with clothes in, and he's got piercing blue eyes, of course, and he's got really a big mop of mad hair. And for the 2 hours of the film, I mean, obviously it was a very heavy going film. I wasn't just thinking about me and my silly book.
Where you're going with this?
I was also just thinking, Dave, it's my Dave. And I actually got as far as thinking I should write to Joaquin Phoenix and tell him. And I was like, yeah, no, don't do that. He's not going to reply.
You never know.
Exactly. You never do know. And on another personal question, what's your best dramatic exit? Who was it with, and did you sashay out successfully? Lindsay, I'm going to start with you.
I've got one for this actually, which is a concern. About 3-4 years ago, 3 years ago maybe, and I was in Texas on holiday, visiting a friend who had been an ex-boyfriend. He was an ex-boyfriend, and now we are friends, and we're still friends, which is why he won't mind me telling this story. But we were hanging out in Austin, and we were the group of friends, and then all the friends just sort of disappeared, and it was the end of the night, and someone had had some drinks. Everyone had had some drinks, but someone had had more drinks than some other people. And said ex-boyfriend was being very touchy-feely and flirty, and obviously, you're on holiday and it's all old feeling. You're like, oh, maybe this is a brilliant idea to hook up with my ex when I'm on holiday in the city where he now lives. So he sort of was a bit touchy-feely, so I made a spectacularly terrible pass. And he was like, oh no, this is a terrible idea because you don't live here and we'll just get like messed up again and I'll be heartbroken because you're going to leave and this is dreadful. And I was obviously being a massive, not smart person thinking like, well, I just was after a quick snog on holiday, and okay, you've made it really dramatic. So he was all like, oh no, this is awful, like, what should we do, what should we do? So I was just like, you're a bad word. Threw my drink at him, stood up, minced straight out of this bar in the hotel lounge, and had magically managed to find myself in the kitchen, because I thought I was going for the lifts and it was actually the kitchen. So then I was just stood at 2 o'clock in the morning in the hotel kitchens, bawling my eyes out, covered in makeup, disgusting because it's Austin, so it's sweaty and gross and it's late. It was just horrible. And then they're like, the guy from the kitchen was like, are you all right? I'm like, I can't go back out there. And they sat me down and gave me some water and some toast. And then like they picked the hottest guy that worked in the kitchen to walk me back out. Because he was like, oh, take my kitchen stuff off and put my t-shirt back on so it looks like we've like hooked up. And then I'll walk you back across the lounge to the lift, so in case he's still out there, he thinks you like don't even care. Obviously, I just looked like an absolute disaster, and I had to go down and apologise the next day, and didn't even make it to my bed in the hotel room. Woke up on the settee just with mascara glued my eyes shut. My friend got up and was like, what is this? It was just awful. It was awful from the beginning to the end, to the sashaying, the throwing of the drink, the ending up in the kitchen, and then having to be walked across the hotel by one of the kitchen boys because I was such a state. But it was dramatic. It was definitely dramatic.
It's a very good answer. It is a fantastic answer.
Awful.
It's me. Lucy, anything you could compare with?
I guess so. When my partner and I, George, were travelling, we've travelled quite a bit together. Being me, I got the illness that a lot of people get when they're travelling, and needed to spend quite a lot of time in the toilet. Oh God, it was so ridiculous. Anyway, we don't fight that often, but we had a fight in our tiny. We were staying in the weirdest hostel ever, and we'd got a private room because basically my insides were so unreliable I could not be sharing a toilet with anyone else. So it's basically, this hostel was in an underground car park. It's very weird. And our room, I think the only private room in the hostel, was just literally a sort of chipboard cube in the middle of this underground, like a free floating cardboard tube box cube thing in the middle of this car park with a little cube of an ensuite as part of it. We had a row, and I stormed off, except I stormed into the bathroom rather than out into the main body of the hostel. So I then had to stay there in the toilet, but then obviously the illness came back. So poor George was sitting, and of course it was such a crap hostel that the cubicle was literally just walls. It didn't have a roof. So poor George had to watch me storm out into the bathroom, and very, very kindly didn't laugh at the fact that I'd gone into the bathroom and decided to just run with that. And then B had to hear me being really ill in the bathroom. Oh, it was awful. It was the worst storm out you could write. I must put it in a book one day. It wasn't as.
My God. Oh man. But they are fantastic stories. I think it's a very good exit point as we start to wrap up, that you both have such fantastic kind of dramatic exit points, both into the wrong room. But thank you very much for sharing. As we must finish in about 1 minute, just very quickly, do you have any tips that you would give aspiring writers, people hoping to get started or to get an agent or anything like that, that you could give just in a few bullet points? Lindsay, over to you.
I always give the same advice, and I just don't know as I can give any better, which is just to write. Like, the most common question I get asked is, how do you start writing? And the best answer is write. You know, it's I can't see that you can start from any other. I mean, read as much as you can and then write as much as you can, and the more you write, the more natural it will feel. The more you'll find your voice, you'll find your character. I mean, you can write anything as well. You don't have to sit down and write a novel, write a blog, write tweets, write anything that involves you putting your words in your brain down on a piece of paper or a screen. And that, I think, is the best and only thing I can say to anyone.
And Lucy?
I agree, actually, and that's the only piece of advice I ever give, and that's the only piece of advice I was ever given, actually. When I started writing my book, I sat down, I couldn't write a thing. I was just frozen. And so I emailed the editor, who kind of approached me and said, you should write a book. And I said, so I'm ready to write. Can you give me some tips? And she was like, just write the book. And I was like, oh yeah, but I don't actually know how to, because you just, taught me through the nuts and bolts of it. And she said, no, just write a book. And this conversation went on about 5 times. And she said, I'm not talking to you again, write a book. I mean, she said it nicely, but that was basically the gist. And that's therefore the only piece of advice I can give. Same as Lindsay, just keep writing. I mean, I would be even more brutal than Lindsay. I would say, don't try and hone your writing skills with a blog or reviewing other people's books. The only way you're going to practice writing a novel is by writing a novel and making all the same mistakes that all of us have made. My first novel, I was in my agent's office for about 3 hours, listening to her explaining why it was potentially brilliant, but at the moment completely diabolical. You will make mistakes, and that's completely fine, but you can only make them and learn from them if you write a book.
Thank you both very much. You've been amazing. And thank you to all the readers and fans and aspiring writers and people who've taken part in the Romance Festival this weekend for amazing questions that have been sent in and for being here and being part of it. Lucy's new book, The Day We Disappeared, is out in April and is her big breakout, blow your mind book. And Lindsay's novel, Always the Bridesmaid, is out in May and is her, of course, also equally big, amazing, breakout, blow your socks off book. So they both have these fabulous new books coming out for you to look forward to. And thanks everyone for being part of this and sharing your time with us. Thanks very much, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.